good.
So, welcome to the Inner Critic. That is our topic today. Liz Anderson is with our Huntington Insurance business. I'm thrilled. Liz stepped up to say, I want to talk about this topic and can we make it happen for the women's group? So, she's going to really lead the majority of the conversation today. She's very active with our group and one of the most avid readers I have ever met. And she's full of knowledge, full of enthusiasm. So, I know you'll have a wonderful time hearing her information today. And then, of course, myself will be giving you a little bit of information. So, before we really get into the meat of the topic, I wanted Liz to really talk about the evolution of how this topic came about.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. I think it all started with the comment Diana alluded to of me being an avid reader. And it all started with actually Huntington's walking program several years back. And as I walked, I started to listen to books. And when you're walking an hour a day, you go through a lot of books. And so I think it was from our Lean In group that I heard of Brene Brown. And Rising Strong was the book of the moment. And so I started with that book and just started plowing through each and every one of them. And as I come across books and materials that I think some other women might enjoy, I share that with them. And so Diana and I must have begun talking about Rising Strong. So quickly, let me just point you to the fact that in the back of the handout there is a listing of the different materials that Brene Brown has published or provided. The Rising Strong is her most recent book, and it talks about failure and rising back up. The one that resonated most with me was The Gifts of Imperfection, and that's where a lot of what we're going to discuss today came from. Daring Greatly is another great one, and those three kind of all fit together, of be yourself, step up, and get back up when you fail, since we're all going to fail. There's some other talks that she has online, as well as some videos and some TED Talks. So those are all in the back of the material, so you can check it out after we get done talking today. But as Diana and I were talking through Brene Brown and the different types of materials and themes that she has in her books, I was trying to come up with an idea of how we can package this and make it relevant to the Women's Resource Group, keep it career-related and not really dwell upon shame is one of Brene Brown's big themes that run through all of her books. And it's a bit of a downer if that's all we talked about today. So I was trying to characterize what pretty much every book that Brene has written talks about. And I summarized it as this happiness that exists sometime in the future. I can't have it now, but I can attain it if I do certain things, if I get certain things, if certain things happen. So it's always this conditional happiness that we never seem to achieve. And as that made sense and as we were talking through it, it kind of is the enough syndrome. And that melded into a conversation of we talk ourselves out of opportunities and we don't take risks because we have this inner voice that holds us back. And it tells us that, no, you're not good enough. And so it keeps us from getting to that conditional place that we need to get to be happy. And so as we talked more and more about it, we landed on this common theme that we both had been exposed to in very different circumstances, but it was packaged to me and taught to me as the inner critic. And I learned it at a women's camp that I went to. And as soon as I mentioned that struck a chord with Diana, and she just said, hey, yeah, that totally sounds like something that I've done a lot of study and research on. And I believe, Diana, you said you had a certification. So we thought that you might want to cover what you had learned and where your expertise lies now and explain to us this inner critic theory.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Liz. And so I want to just share, what is this inner critic? So to start, as women, we all grapple with this voice that Liz has mentioned, and I call it the voice of self-doubt. And we grapple with it in one way or another. For some of us, it's prominent around our professional lives. For some other women, it comes around their sense of competence as a mother maybe, or a partner. And then there are others of us that have this voice around our appearance, body image, and even aging. So this voice, and Liz touched upon this, has become this background noise we live with. And because of that background noise, because of the self-doubt that surfaces, the cost to us are enormous and can be enormous. So what's the inner critic? It is the voice in our heads, and that voice can be characterized by some qualities that Liz has mentioned, but some additional ones could just be downright harshness, a comment made, you aren't ready yet, or you aren't good at negotiating, etc. So the inner critic causes us not to live or be what I call realistic thinkers. And when I say realistic thinking or a thinker, it's we're forward thinking, we're getting grounded, we're seeking solutions, we're calm, we're highly creative, we're looking forward. So I want to share quickly with you an example of what an inner critic conversation can sound like, and then if we change it up to being this realistic thinker, what it sounds like. So this first example is the inner critic. I would love to start a retail business. I would love the independence, the challenge. I feel like it's what I am meant to do, but I don't have what that takes. I need much more experience. I don't have the access to capital. And doing this would be irresponsible to my family. I would be putting them at great financial risk. Now, putting on that realistic thinker hat, or just getting grounded and in that space, here's how the same topic might sound. I would love to start a retail business. I feel that it's what I am meant to do. I don't know if I have what is needed. I wonder how I could find out and see how that fits with where I am. I'll do X to learn more about what that is. That feels exciting. It also feels a little scary too. And of course, I'm really committed to supporting my family financially. I wonder how I can do this and maintain support for them. So very much, now some of us on the phone might say, well, Diana, you're talking about that voice, that self-talk. And it is a little bit of that as well. The inner critic speaks up with more viciousness and volume when we are exposing ourselves to a real or perceived vulnerability. And that word vulnerability is critical. Liz has mentioned it, and she'll share more when she goes through the principles that she's going to review today. But it's something that triggers a fear of embarrassment, rejection, failure, or pain. So a couple more items I want to share, actually 3 or 4, and then I'll turn it back over to Liz. So something you can do around practicing what to do when this inner critic is showing up, that moment to moment it's there, or when the self-doubt is surfacing. You'll want to label it. You'll want to notice it. So when you hear your inner critic talking, label the voice by simply saying to yourself, I'm hearing my inner critic right now. And that's the foundation and the foundational inner critic practice and principle on everything else that I'll mention here shortly. So just label it and notice it. You want to separate the I from the inner critic. So for example, you might say my inner critic is having a little freak out right now, rather than I'm having a freak out right now. When you refer to the inner critic as that inner critic instead of conflating it with the core I of you, you train your mind that it's simply one voice within you and not your primary voice. The best thing about the inner critic, and this is where you can have some fun with it. I've not been as creative with it my own, but you can create a character that personifies your inner critic. And it's a great tool actually from the program I went through last year that, you know, it creates a character with a name and a visual image for you. So it helps yourself remember, again, that this critic is not the core of you. It's one voice with its own personality and pathology. Okay. You want to look for some humor. So ask yourself, what is absurd or funny about what my critic is saying right now? And then you want to picture the voice receding into space. Notice where physically it feels like that inner critic voice is located in or around your body, and picture the voice receding into space, moving away from you. And this is one of my best task or activities to do when this inner voice is surfacing. Imagine that you can simply turn down the volume on the critic's voice. And again, the coach I heard this from said you need to literally reach your arm out like you're turning down a radio, but you see your image if you've created this character and created this image of this inner voice, and just turn down the volume, turn down the critic's voice. So my last two items I'll share about how I define this inner critic is you want to always recognize it when it shows up, name it for what it is. And the other great thing is you don't have to win the argument with your inner critic. You have to step away from the conversation. And by stepping away, you might literally either internally or actually physically say, thanks, but I've got this one covered. So Liz, I'll turn it back to you.
That was great. That I even got fresh thoughts as you were talking through it. Some things that helped me to identify that inner voice, because I didn't understand and single out my voice the same day that it was explained to me. It was likely weeks or maybe even months later that I just had an aha moment of, holy cow, that's what she was talking about. That's what Joanna was explaining to me at camp. Some things that might help others to get where I finally got to. It's not others' voices. It's not what you think other people have told you negative about yourself, that you're not capable, that you're not good enough. It's not somebody running space in your head, because it's not separate from you. It is a part of you. And Diana, when you were talking about giving it a funny name, it's the lies that I tell myself. And so that's something that I constantly have to remind myself when I hear my inner voice, is that inner voice doesn't necessarily have to tell the truth. And
Right.
So I was just picturing John Lovitz as being from Saturday Night Live. He was the one who would be like, yeah, I'm going out with Morgan Fairchild, and I'm the president of Exxon, and just constantly telling lies. And that would be, I couldn't name mine Lizzie Liar, but it would be Letty or Laura Liar might be the inner voice name that I would give to mine. But yeah, if anybody on the call is listening, if anybody else has been exposed to this before and has a good name, I'd love to hear it. But that is invaluable. If you want to try and force that inner critic voice, think about that BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal that you have put out there, and think about taking a step towards it, and then listen for all the voices, the reasons, everything negative that's holding you back. And chances are, among that noise, that negative stuff is your inner voice, and it's the one saying, well, you're not good enough, or what if it's not what you think, or what if they see through you and they see that you're not all that and a box of candy. It's it's that underlying theme, and it feeds right into what Brene Brown talks about with the shame. And the one major topic that we all need to overcome, as it does hold us back as we make both short-term and long-term career decisions, from what am I going to wear today, when that inner voice or the shamefulness tells you, well, you shouldn't wear that because you're too fat, or you're too short, or when I want to wear my heels, that voice might tell me I look too tall when I wear heels. So it's listening for that inner voice telling you that it's lying to you, telling you that that's not the truth, and then we're going to provide some tools to help you work through that. So I see we got a couple. Do we have a couple names there? Inner Bogart? I like that one. That's a good one. So I'm going to pause right here and see if there's any questions. Love it, Kate. All right. Probably let me go ahead then and just tell you what Brene Brown, her thoughts on shame. And then once we get that all behind us, then we can go ahead and talk about the tools to help us address these things. So shame, first of all, we have to admit that we all have it. That's like the sad truth. Sorry, I'm bringing you bad news. But everybody at some point in their life feels shame. And it's the feeling of unworthiness, unlovability, that we're a bad person, that we don't belong. It can come from your upbringing. I have a very good friend of mine that shared with me that she came up in utter poverty, and she literally after school the family would go dumpster diving, and they would collect aluminum cans to turn in to get money so they could eat. I mean, that is about as poor as you can get. And so she had to do a lot of work to overcome that because of that shame that understandably that she grew up and still to this day feels. Also, if we've done something bad in our life, a one-time misjudgment, bad act, something that we shouldn't have done, or it could have been a lifestyle. It could be prior abuse that we've been exposed to, but all those experiences embed upon us shame, and it doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering or a huge victimization. It can be small things, but we all carry around the shame. So the first thing we need to do is identify it and to realize when we're feeling it. A lot of times it goes down to fear of people seeing through us, knowing what we did, just that horrible dread of exposure. So we need to identify it. We need to evaluate critically, is it really valid? All because I was brought up in utter poverty, does that make me a bad person? All because I did something bad before, does that make me bad now? Am I unredeemable? Does it really matter? So it's analyzing it and then getting to a place where we're ready to walk through it and move on. So some of these tools that we're going to discuss next will help us overcome this shame because we can't avoid it. The best we can do is to work with it and work through it and minimize it and the effects that it has when we make decisions and when we work towards our goals. So I will take a pause there and see if we're ready to jump into some of these great tools from the Brene Brown books. Are there any comments or questions?
Liz, I will just add a quick thought, and as you get ready to go through the handout and the principles, we have a bolded section right above the principles, or a statement, I should say, effective leaders are good at. And I just want to make sure we all know that on this phone, we are all leaders in some capacity. So that phrase, those words, are not representing some title position, but us as leaders, as human beings. So I just wanted to stress that. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, that is a great point. I'll go ahead and start now with the handout. It, this is actually a combination of two sets of practices, guidelines, guideposts Brene Brown refers to in one of the books, and really it's all about wholehearted living. And the 10 cultivating guideposts are from the Gifts of Imperfection, and it's actually to cultivate a wholehearted living. And so to tie it into leadership and career, we just rebranded it as what we need to do to be good leaders, what we need to do to have full lives. So please don't get hung up on the way that we packaged it. Just for one other point of explanation as we get into this, the rules of engagement are taken from Rising Strong. So if you want more on either of these, those are the two books that these points specifically came from. And the resources there at the back, and I'm happy to follow up too if you have any questions. So the first guidepost has to do with cultivating authenticity. And I've heard this a lot in leadership forums, in speeches that I've gone to, presentations about how to be an effective leader, is that we need to be authentic. We need to show our real selves. If we show up as some phony, some bigger than, better than life, perfection, flawless character, people will have difficulty relating to us. And so we need to be courageous enough and be ready to present our authentic self. And to get there, we have to let go of what people think, and we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And that's a very scary proposition for myself, and I'm sure for many people. To be authentic, we have to consciously choose every day about how we want to live. We have to intentionally go about showing up and allowing ourselves to be seen, being honest about who we are, and letting our imperfections show. In doing so, people can relate to us, and they'll trust us. It builds confidence, and oftentimes, if you shared even just a little bit about yourself, I have found that others then will open up, and it begins, a true friendship, or at least a connection, as a starting place to grow from. If we aren't willing to do so, if we insist upon keeping our mask on or keeping on our suit of armor, others just don't really want to connect with us. They can tell that we're being phony. They can tell that we're being cold. There's a lot of different ways that this can come off or feel to the person or people that we're talking to, but we're not going to get away with it, is the bottom line. And in a career scene, I really do think it can be a killer. When you're sitting across the desk and interviewing for a job, when you're networking, when you're meeting new people, when you extend that right hand to shake their hand and look them in the eye, if you're not being sincere, if you're consciously trying to be someone else, I think it can be quite damaging, and it's risky, but it's something that we need to do to put ourselves out there. Um,
Liz,
yeah,
can I interrupt and share something?
sure.
For what Liz is going to review, this is probably my big one, authenticity. And I too have read the Raising Strong book some time ago, and this past weekend I started listening to it on audio just to get ready for today again. Um, and Brene said something that just always sticks with me, and she says, we need to be able to say, hey, I'm having this emotional moment right now, and can we talk about this so I can help understand what's going on with me or learn what's happening so I know what to do next. Saying that, she goes, the unfortunate thing is our culture doesn't allow for us to have that vulnerability. And I always think about when she has said that in her book, and then when I just heard it again this week through her audio, because it's like, what would it be like if we really could get to that place of being able to say, I'm having an emotional moment now. I mean, I have an emotional moment every day of my life. And there are times, especially at work, I've learned just Diana, you need to be calm. And that's that inner critic either coming in or this place of, can I be who I say I am? But if I could just say, could you just tell me, here's what I'm surfacing, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? So it's amazing when we can't have that conversation. As you see what Liz has put in the rule of engagement, that we're wired for story. And even last night when I was talking to someone about a situation, I said, and these were the words I used, I said, now here's the story I've created about the situation that happened. And the person came back and said, story? I said, yeah, it's a story because I haven't gone to the source yet to ask the question, am I correct with what I've made this mean? So, Liz, I just felt that was important to
Uh,
share at that point in time. Thanks.
no, that's fabulous, and you it brings up a great point in my mind is that we're just talking and putting this out there as human beings, but especially as women, for us to try and recognize and ask for acceptance of an emotional situation is just double jeopardy in that we always try and minimize our femininity or our we don't want to be that emotional woman that is the
Mm-hmm.
stereotypical thing. So it's in our best interest, I think, to do so and to just say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and especially to provide some context. It has nothing to do with what's going on right now. It has everything to do with something else, but I just need to address it and work through it before I can move on and be productive in what we're trying to achieve.
Totally
Um,
agree.
yeah, and there is a risk around that in that we need to choose the right people uh, to be open to um, and how much information to give them. So it's being mindful of what do I need to share to let this person understand what I'm feeling, but also protect them and not get into that TMI situation too. So it's difficult, but I think when done effectively, it garners respect and also builds a trust and really helps develop and cultivate that working relationship.
So quickly, Liz, Nicole has asked a great question because this is what something we also grapple with, if you will. How do you know? And you just said TMI, so that's what made me think. Let's touch on this real quickly. How do you know if you're sharing too much, being too open? Because I know with me, I'm a freaking open book.
Well, in one of our books, Brene suggests that we look at the intentions. Are we looking? We need to go about it in pure of heart, in that we're not looking for sympathy. We're not looking to show off or somehow grandstand to draw attention away from what the real problem is, but enough information so the person can understand what's going on in my life without going into gross details, without dragging other people into it. But enough, I think you would also look for the feedback too, and the body language. If the person starts to pull away or give you signals that either they're not receptive or open to the idea of listening, or that you're in an area that they're not ready to hear. So maybe slowly but surely work through it and try and judge from the person you're speaking to whether it's being received or not in the right light.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting some great conversation through chat, which I always love.
Yay!
Yes, and so I want to respect time too. So, Liz, I'm going to try to keep myself quiet.
Yeah.
Let's go through a couple more quickly, if you don't mind. Then let's stop and open it up to see if folks just want to openly share anything, if you don't mind.
So go ahead and go on to the next one.
Yeah, please. Thanks.
Okay. Oh yeah, this is a huge one. The next one has to do with, it's called cultivating self-compassion, but more importantly, it's letting go of perfectionism. And so many of us, and I don't think it's a leader thing, it's not a woman thing, I think it's just a human being thing, in that we all want to be perfect. And we need to just let that stuff go. It's very closely tied into being authentic, in that if we're going to be authentic, sorry, we're going to have to show that we're not perfect. So it's being real. To go over quickly the definition, perfectionism is about being that perfect, but more importantly, it's about trying to look perfect, because I think we all know that we can never actually reach perfectionism. So instead, it's putting on that false sense of being perfect. It is unattainable, sorry. It's also about seeking external validation. It's seductive. It is trying to avoid criticism, and honestly, it can go to the point of being addictive. That probably feeds into OCD behaviors too, in that it's trying to just control everything. So we just need to work on being ourselves. And to get there, there's 3 points that are included in Brené's books. And first of all, it's about being kind to ourselves and recognizing that we're not perfect and not beating ourselves up over that fact. It's understanding that we are our worst critic. And I think that's all true of ourselves. We would never talk to other people the same way that we talk to ourselves. So we need to let that stuff go and be kind to ourselves and be forgiving. Also, we need to realize that I'm going through it, you're going through it, we're all going through it, we're all inadequate, and we all feel that way. To kind of hammer this one home, it was a while back at a Weld event, I believe, and I heard Barbara Benham speak, and it was right around the time that she had just been announced into her latest promotion, into her latest role. And when she admitted that she still struggled with the imposter syndrome, I was just floored. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but to understand that we all feel imposter syndrome, being that we're not really good enough to do what we're doing, and that we're one step away from being found out. That's what imposter syndrome is. And so understanding that we all struggle with that or similar feelings of inadequacy. And then the third piece is mindfulness, acknowledging all this and not dwelling on it. Kind of going back to what Diana said, is understanding that they're negative emotions and maybe rebranding them in a more realistic, if we can't get to positive, but at least in a realistic sense, though, so that we're not looking at ourselves in the funny mirror at the carnival, that we are being true to ourselves about what's going on. So those are just some ways to work through self-compassion. And then for the rule of engagement, to draw that in quickly, it's the same whether we're struggling with perfectionism at home or whether it's on the job. It's that self-loving and letting go of being perfect. It's the same process using these same tools. And it's just as important that we be real with our husbands and with our families, with wives. I'm sure there might be a man on the call, or others. And then, the same with our coworkers, those that report to us and those that we report to, just everyone around us, being authentic, being compassionate to ourselves, and being true to ourselves and allowing others to see through that. So I'll take a breath there and see if there's additional feedback. Diana?
We have some chat going on, and if anyone would want to verbally share anything or share their comments they've placed in chat, I believe you should be able, without me muting the entire audience, I believe you should be able to press your *6. Kate just recently posted, I cognitively know that I'm not alone, but it's a huge help to hear that. Oh, so we were talking about, Kate said, I struggle with imposter syndrome so hard. And a lot of folks, well, I shouldn't say a handful of folks said, me too, or I guess I have that one. And yeah, that whole imposter syndrome is interesting for when we choose, if it's us, when we choose to use it, because I will say, just from what I've learned about myself, it's a choice if I go to that place. And I'm probably trying to be someone I'm not. As Tamara shares, she likes to share her story because it makes her who she is, and I agree with her.
That's a healthy place.
It is a very healthy place. And so she also said she can't be responsible for how others are choosing or how others are seeing her or responding, and that's a correct statement because we can only control ourselves. I always say if we're curious, and Brene talks a lot about curiosity and that it's a healthy place to be as well when you're curious, but to ask the question then. And Wendy said this in one of her comments, that you have to be ready though for the response, which could be someone's feedback. And you've got to take the feedback, and I always say as hard as it can be sometimes, because I'm going to say this and I don't practice it 100%, you got to say thank you, and then you've got to decide what you're going to do with that feedback. So let's see, there's just a few more that have come in here.
Hey, Diana, it's Wendy. While you're looking at
good.
that, I was just going to apply. It's great for just practical business purposes, too. The example I was thinking of recently is every year we go through a repricing project at the bank. And I try to gather feedback from, everyone that I can. And sometimes people don't come forth. But as soon as I put a straw man out there and say, here's some things that we should be thinking about, or here's what we're going to do, you will absolutely get feedback. People will tell you that's a great idea, or there's no way in heck we can do that. But it starts the conversation and it helps us move forward and be productive. But I've done that in a lot of cases. I think people are afraid to just kind of share their thoughts. But if you are willing to be vulnerable, willing to just put something out there that you think is, generally good and going to accomplish the objective, go for it. People will absolutely start sharing, but you do have to be prepared. And then you just, have a healthy conversation around why, and I think it helps build consensus, and it brings a balanced approach to whatever business objective you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And one piece of advice I heard recently on getting feedback on yourself is asking for it in a very small, targeted way. In that, when I get off this call, I'll be like, "Hey, that was a lot of fun. Did you enjoy it? What did you think? What could we have done differently?" And then making it a safe place for folks to have that conversation. So Diana, you done playing with the screen? Hello?
sorry. I am on mute
Oh,
and
I thought
talking.
maybe I was.
No, I'm not. I'm not playing with the screen at all. So
Oh,
someone
okay.
else, which is fine. I mean, because we don't really have anything currently presented on the screen other than what I started off with the call.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and plug through another one then. Let's see. We're down to maybe the third one. Cultivating a resilient spirit, and this is a big one. Well, I've said that about all of them, haven't I? But anyways, it's letting go of numbing and powerlessness. The definitions are provided there in the handouts. Resiliency is the ability to overcome adversity, and rebounding, which is, again, the theme in Rising Strong. And so resilient spirit then is being willing to experience the feelings and knowing that you can get through whatever lies ahead, with the unhealthy coping mechanism of numbing being the refusal or denial to feel what you're actually feeling. And it can be in just the form of denial, or it can be through actual substance numbing, whether it's drinking or drugging or overeating. It can be any type of behavior that helps stuff those emotions down so you don't have to feel it right now. Because, sorry, it's got to come up sooner or later, and to be healthy, we need to work through it. So some of the suggestions that Brene Brown had for resiliency, resilient people have good problem-solving skills. So we know how to work through problems. We get to the root of the emotions, and we deal with what the actual cause of the problem is, the discomfort. Also, resilient people are likely to seek help. So we're willing to talk to others, whether we need a professional, whether we need a peer, whether it's something at work that's bothering us, a family member, or it could be a trusted counselor, a clergyman, a clinical professional. It could be any sort of person who is qualified to help us work through what we need to. Also, resilient people believe they can help themselves manage feelings and they cope. So that they truly believe that they have the ability to work through it if they try. Resilient people also have great social support. Well, maybe not great, but have some form of social support, whether it's a good boss, like I have, or good friends, good peers, a supportive family, a great network, a good church home. It can be any number of things. And then finally, resilient people have connections. So yet another argument and reason that we need to be authentic and build those connections is that we need each other to help each other through this crazy thing called life. The rule of engagement for this one is just another one of those ugly truths. If we're brave enough, often enough, we will all fail. Brene says it's the physics of vulnerability. When we do put ourselves out there, when we take risk, when we try and do anything to move ourselves towards our goal, sooner or later we're going to fail and we're going to fall. And so it's having those tools and the support system and the resiliency and allowing ourselves to feel those feelings so we can work through it, pick ourselves up, and move on. So any questions or comments on that one, or should we keep going?
I would say let's keep going. We've got about 15 minutes left. So.
Well, I told Diana we're not going to get through all this, but
but we're going to try darn hard.
Okay, I will keep plowing ahead. The next one, I won't say it's a powerful one. I'll say it's one that I really like, and I've been working on a lot and doing a lot of study right now, and it's cultivating gratitude and joy. It's letting go of scarcity and the fear of dark. I was reading last night, just looking into some more materials, and Brene Brown quotes Brother David, which there was a long title for the guy, but when you Google it like I did, you found it real quick. But Brother David has a quote that says, "The root of joy is gratefulness. It is not joy that makes us grateful. It is gratitude that makes us joyful. So this is one of those truths that practicing gratitude leads to joy. It's not being in joy that makes us grateful. So in order to get to the place of joy, we need to practice gratitude. And gratitude is an intentional approach to life. It's actions, it's behaviors, it's words. It's just a way of living that we need to embrace to get to this place of joy and peace and love and happiness occasionally. So the happiness, to make the distinction, happiness has to do with a circumstance. Right now I'm incredibly happy to be here. But joy is the underlying spiritual principle and feeling that just lives within me and comes out every pore when I'm in it. It's not tied to the circumstances that I'm in at the moment. And it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with tangible things like attaining the jobs or the money or the cute boyfriend. It has to do with the interconnectedness among each other, among other people, the relationships that we build. And it's, in some folks, tied to the existence of a power greater than ourselves. Many people have that religious or spiritual practice where there is a more powerful being. What we're trying to get away from is always that scarcity that we discussed earlier, the enough syndrome, not being thin enough, not being rich enough, not being happy enough, just not having enough. Or if there was enough, not having enough of it be mine, as though there was a finite number of resources in the world. So you having more means that I get less. So it's moving away from the scarcity. And then also another theme that runs through Brene Brown's books is this foreboding joy, that even though at this moment I have found joy, I have found peace, I'm in a good place, I can't really enjoy it because at any moment the other shoe's going to drop and I'm going to lose everything. So it's that terrifying emotion of desperately hanging on to the little piece of joy that I have right now. And it's self-denial of the bigger picture of engorging myself, just diving into and surrounding myself with love and peace and joy and gratitude. So the rule of engagement that goes along with this one is the comparative suffering. And in this one, it's taking pride in the my life stinks more than your life stinks, even though you say your life stinks. It's when someone else comes to us with a challenge and we have trouble feeling empathy or compassion because we've had it worse. And it's just clinging to that dark place and denying the joy. Also, and I think I've been guilty of this one, it's failing to celebrate the little victories that we do achieve in life. I get a promotion to staff officer, but I can't enjoy it because you're a VP. And so my little promotion is nothing compared to where you are. So again, it's living in comparison to others and not allowing ourselves to be happy with what we have, just experiencing the wonderful things that we are blessed with, the gifts and the talents, the family or the job or the passions, the connections that we're surrounded with, but yet shut ourselves off to constantly.
Hey, Liz, I'm going to interrupt again. And
Great, I was going to take a breath.
Well, no, I apologize, but I just want to. There are a few that I don't know. All of them are important, but because, again, we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm not sure if anyone has time to go over a little bit. But could you go to these two for the last two? Because I think one might touch upon something that was mentioned in chat around religion, and I'm not sure. I know Bernays talks a lot about spirituality, but it's your next one, intuition and trusting faith. And then could we go to the letting go of anxiety as a lifestyle?
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Shoot, I will try and go about this without stepping on toes and being sensitive to all. Cultivating intuition and trusting faith. Without getting into the spiritual realm, so to speak, this is really believing in ourselves and believing in our abilities. It's letting go of having to know how this is going to end. It's relying on our instinct. It's relying on our experience, our gut. If you're an NCIS fan, you got Gibbs in his gut that is always right. It's just knowing and trusting in myself that I have the knowledge and I have the insight and that I can do this. The faith aspect is believing what we can't see. It's not knowing how the story's going to end, letting the movie play out, and just believing that no matter how it ends, we're going to be okay. Knowing that we have the strength that we can get through it, whether it's a happy ending, whether it's a sad ending, whether it's actually doesn't have an end that we have to wait for the next sequel or prequel or trilogy to come out, but it's willing to move forward despite the uncertainty. Let's see, I pulled a quote from the Brene Brown website. She says that, in her words, suffocated by uncertainty, I tend to rush into decisions rather than taking my time and to feel and think my way through the possibilities. Or I do the exact opposite. I don't listen to that strong initial gut, and I start pulling people around me for an answer. So those are two avoidance techniques to even believing in ourselves. So it's rushing to make a decision, or it's taking a survey rather than trusting what you truly believe in and moving forward. The Rising Strong is a spiritual practice. It's recognizing that we are all connected to one another in some realm. To some, it's in the spiritual sense. To some, it's in a religious sense. You could go so far as into certain religions and practices. In Buddhism, we are all one, and so you are me and I am you, and we are in this all together. We are all in the same struggle. And so it's recognizing that connection, and it's grounding ourselves in the love and belonging, and it's allowing ourselves to go places and just trusting that we will be able to get through it successfully, and that what is meant to be is out there, and so we need to step forward and experience it. The other one, shoot down to anxiety. Letting go. Okay, that's the cultivating calm and stillness and letting go of anxiety as a lifestyle. Calm being the mindfulness and the management of our emotions, and then contrasting that with stillness being the clearing of the mind, and letting go is anxiety as a lifestyle. First of all, anxiety is not a disease, an illness, or a biological condition that you inherit. It's not a result of a chemical imbalance. It's a condition that we cause. We bring it upon ourselves. It lingers when we don't know how to address it and to manage it. But the good news is that we can. By engaging in these behaviors of embracing calm and embracing stillness, we can step back from the situation. We can assess it, and it allows us to calmly and rationally get a grasp on what's going on in life. The other extreme when it comes to anxiety as a lifestyle is that we're constantly trying to one-up each other on the productivity and anxiety and the worry scale. And so it's letting go of defining ourselves or making it a requirement of being a business person, a leader, a successful person in our career, that in order to do so, we need to be busy and productive and doing something every single minute. And when we're not doing so here, then we need to run home and we need to engage in a bunch of other activities and make sure our kids are too. It's letting go of those behaviors that we allow ourselves to get into, which is really, it can be an avoidance technique for ignoring the problems or ignoring the emptiness or ignoring these other issues, that we're not being joyful, that we're not having fulfilling lives, that we're not doing something that we're passionate about. It allows us to not take a look at that if we're always being busy. So what we need to do to get into these places of calm and stillness, we need to take care of ourselves, first of all, physically. We need to turn off the autopilot of just being busy to be busy, and that is something that I personally and those around me have heard me talk about, that I'm intentionally cutting back on some of the activities I'm doing and being more mindful about the ones that I do choose to participate in and where my time is going. It's providing compassionate self-talk to ourselves. It is setting aside time. It's taking up practices, whether it is listening to something positive when you're driving to work, whether it's taking 5 minutes in the morning to get in touch with our true selves and our emotions. But regardless of what we do, it needs to be intentional, and we need to develop a practice to cultivate it and build it into our daily lives to keep our sanity. So I realize we're up against the time, so any last comments, Diana?
No, I'm thrilled. I love the engagement. I love the energy. Liz, I cannot thank you enough. If all of you think you would like to continue this conversation, I'm more than happy to set up another call late in the month or early next month for us to continue, just to have maybe even an open chat and talk about examples. So you tell me, you send me a message, whatever. I am going to do a quick infomercial here. You will be seeing 2 invites either tonight or when you come in tomorrow. We've got our August and September sessions scheduled. August, we're actually going to talk about the confidence code, which leads very nicely into what Liz has presented today. And then in September, I have someone coming in to talk about voting to get us ready for November, and to talk about, what it means to vote and how to vote and what you need to do if you're not already in the midst of things. So watch for those invites if you would like to participate with us. And Liz, again, I cannot thank you enough. Awesome job. And I'll continue to read some of the chats as we're wrapping up here, but thank you all. I've recorded this. We'll have it posted, if not this afternoon, tomorrow morning, out on our women's page, and I'll send you all a reminder. And have a great day. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Diana.